Wholesalers, it's Rob Shore at Wholesaler Masterminds, and you may be thinking to yourself, Rob, you're thinking, what do you have besides this amazing podcast? And I'm so glad you asked. Wholesaler Masterminds has an assortment of product and services all designed around the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. As an example, we have coaching services designed to help you power wash your practice, whether you have 2 years or 22 years. We'll offer you speaking live engagements at divisional or national sales meetings. Our scheduling service has dedicated professionals trained in the art of getting you more appointments, Wholesaler Mastermind schedulers. Our Speakers Bureau brings you amazing speakers and processes to get better return on investment out of those speakers. And finally, our partnership, our newest partnership with Allego. If you have Allego and want to get the Wholesaler Masterminds channel on your Allego platform, please let us know. Wholesaler Masterminds, happy to bring you this podcast and so much more. Wholesaler Masterminds, the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesaling. I got a confession to make. Yeah, my wife accuses me of having a disease, and I refute her on it all the time. She seems to think it has something to do with my age. I seem to think that it has to do with the world that we live in, the bunch of stuff that we're supposed to comprehend and put in the vault and be able to recall later. The disease is CRS. I don't know if you know anyone with CRS, but it's debilitating. It's insidious. Can't remember shit. And today, our guest is going to help me and help you get over any symptoms you might have of CRS. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm super excited about the diagnosis and prescription that our guest is going to bring us today. Bob Gray is like your favorite college professor, but without the white coat and pocket protectors. He dispels the mystery behind memory. He says an excellent memory isn't a gift, it's attainable by everyone. With previous success as an owner of a fitness facility, Bob understands the importance of staff, clients, customers not feeling like a number, a sale, or just your 2:30 appointment. He puts it simply, having a trained memory in business is like going from ABCs to PhD. He's also a Guinness World Record holder for something, as he puts it, is, well, quite ridiculous. I'll ask him to share that with us at the end. Bob Gray, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Hey, how you doing, Ron?
Ron.
Just kidding.
See how you are?
Number one recall problem.
I want to understand, especially since you've now called me Ron instead of Rob, exactly how are you qualified to be talking about memory? How did you get into this? I mean, what took you from being an entrepreneur, owning a fitness facility, to transition into speaking and training on how to improve people's memory? Where'd you get your training? All that good stuff. So unfurl this for us.
Right. Well, you know what? I've been interested in memory since I was a kid. I was interested in memory. I used to get this magic box every Christmas. And then when I was about 6 or 7, my dad actually got me a magic book. And one of the chapters was on memory. It showed how to memorize 20 items. And it totally blew me away that I could memorize 20 items forwards and backwards and in random order. And literally been interested ever since.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was literally maybe 6 or 7 years old. I've been interested ever since. And I actually emigrated to Canada as an entertainer. And I spent 6 years as a kind of a Mr. Memory guy. I worked with a hypnotist. And then when I reached 30, I decided I wanted a straight job. So I had an opportunity to go into the fitness industry.
What sort of venue did you work in as an entertainer? I'm curious.
We worked at colleges and universities and even comedy clubs. It was like a two-man mentalist comedy act, and I did memory demonstrations and what I'm in the Guinness book for, which, as you said, we can talk about later.
Interesting. So you went from being on stage as an entertainer, and you transitioned that over to now owning a fitness studio. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, I decided I needed to make some money, but I actually worked straight commission. in the fitness industry, and it was commission on selling memberships and also renewals. But I also knew that probably 65% of memberships are sold in January, and then come March, 65% of them are gone. So if I was to make any kind of money, I needed these people to stay into the club, and I needed to build relationships. So I just applied memory systems that I grew up with, and I built relationships by having these little index cards. I had this index card system where we would take photos of members. This was back in the 80s. We had no laptop computers. We would take like those 4 sort of passport photos, and one would go on their card and one would be at the front desk, and the other 2 would get thrown away. But I would keep one, and I had these little like 4x6 index cards, and I would glue the photo to the card, and I had a little box on my desk, and it had these dividers for every month, 1 to 31, and I would write the information about the member, and then anytime I interacted with them, I'd write it down on that card, and then using review, there's been studies about transferring information from short-term to long-term memory. You have to review at very specific times. So if I sold a membership today, say on the 25th, I would review it an hour later, then I would put it under the 26th. And when I came in the next day, I would review that information. I would put it back 3 days later to the 30th, then a week and 2 weeks. But bottom line, what I was doing is I was retaining that information in my short-term memory. So if I were to bump into that member later on in the week, in the club, or more importantly, outside of the club, at the theater or the mall or the supermarket, I was able to draw on this information, which is still in my short-term cache. So bottom line is, the first year I did this, the retention rate of the club went up 13%, which was huge. And I was asked to share it at a fitness convention, and it went down really well. I mean, I'd never spoken before. I came out and I basically did my old memory act, and then I said, okay, now I'm here to show you how I did that. And I shared the systems and techniques, and I got more out of that than when I was entertaining. So I spoke for a little while in the fitness industry while I was still working at the club. And by the way, at that stage, I'd worked my way from salesperson to manager to being a part owner of the club. But then people in the audience slowly started asking me to speak at different conventions, and that was like 35 years ago.
Well, let's talk about then some of the techniques that you employed, because one of the things that strikes me about what you just described, and even though in current day 2018 we have a host of technology to assist us. In fact, we'll talk about your technology to assist us, which I know you've developed. But back then, it was such a manual process, but the studying part didn't go away. I heard you say that if you sign somebody up on the 26th, you review their card on the 26th, and you review their card the next day. So before we get to your technique, which I'm keenly interested in, how much of me getting better with my memory involves studying? And because studying, of course, is precious little time that I already have when I'm an insane wholesaler. So help me bridge that hump first, if you could.
Yeah, sure. These memory systems, they go back thousands of years. One of the biggest advancements have been only about 150 years, and nobody knows them outside of the magic community. But the learning curve is actually very, very short. In order to train your memory to this extent where people think I have a photographic memory. There's no such thing. But people think I have, and all it is applying systems that I've been using forever. But seriously, Rob, one of the biggest concerns I have when I speak is convincing people, because I give some very powerful memory demonstrations, is convincing them that they can do the same things. It's not an innate ability. It's nothing I'm born with. It's simply an application of systems. But like anything worthwhile, it requires effort. But the effort is minimal.
Okay,
it is minimal.
I'm in for minimal effort because I want it. Well, I want to get better at it, but I don't have time to go get degreed at it. Right? I don't necessarily. I can't go back to school for it, but I can definitely implement techniques that will help me.
Sure.
So you mentioned in our pre-call that you had a technique that you wanted to share with the audience before we go through a more elaborate discussion. You had a technique that will help people right out of the gate. So let's put that goodness on them right now.
Okay, this is a great technique for memorizing people when you first meet them. It's a 3-step process. So bear with me here. 3-step process. Step 1, when you meet somebody and they share the same name as somebody famous or somebody you know, think of an object associated with that famous person And then step 3 is see the person you've just been introduced to using that object. So recap. Number 1, think of somebody that shares the same name. Number 2, think of an object associated with that person. Number 3, see this person you've just been introduced to using that object. So let me give you an example. This happened to me about 2 months ago. I was giving a keynote in Ottawa, a morning keynote, and the convention center was attached to the hotel. So I got up in the morning, I go in the elevator to go down to the ground floor, and the elevator stops halfway down, and a guy gets in, and he's got his name tag on, and he immediately says, "Hey, you're Bob Gray. You're our morning keynote." I guess he'd recognized my photo from the program or whatever. So I said, "How you doing?" I put out my hand. He said, "I'm Roger." I said, "Pleased to meet you, Roger." So now, step 1, think of somebody famous that shares the same name. So now, there's no right or wrong here, Rob. It can be Roger Rabbit, it can be Roger Moore. People often say Roger Federer. So that's what I would use, Roger Federer.
Okay.
Step 2, think of an object associated with Roger Federer.
Tennis racket.
That would be a tennis racket. Absolutely perfect. Step 3, see this person in the location that you met them interacting with that object.
So dude in the elevator is holding a tennis racket, and his name is Roger.
You got it.
Oh.
I see him literally serving balls with a huge tennis racket in the elevator. It takes 3, 4, 5 seconds. Now, I get out the elevator. Thanks very much. Nice to meet you. And I go and do my keynote presentation. Afterwards, I'm sitting at a table, and I'm signing books, and there's a line up. And sure enough, halfway down, there's our pal. And he's got his hand covering his name tag, right? That happens all the time. But as he gets to me, he says to me, "What's my name?" Right? So I sign his book. I said, "Happy memories, Roger. All the best, Bob." And I give him the book, and he reads it, and he says to me, "Wow, you're brilliant." I said, "No, it's the systems are brilliant." See, what happens, Rob, is that every listener right now on this podcast could ordinarily get to the stage where that guy would come up to you and you would go, in your mind, "You're the guy I met in the elevator this morning." But that's as far as it goes. It gets cut off at the knees right there. But with one little link of a tennis racket, your mind goes from 3, "You're the guy I met in the elevator," to 2, "I see you holding the tennis racket," to 1, "That reminds me of Roger Federer. Hi, Roger, how you doing? I met you this morning." And that process takes me 15 seconds to explain, but your brain does it instantly. It is such a powerful technique.
Now, you said you've been doing this for 35 years, so I hope I don't put you on the spot when I ask this. I know I won't. What is the science around that? I mean, I'm feeling nerdy. I'm feeling geeky for a second. What is the science? Because if I know, like you said, there's a reasonable chance. It's like when you say, "Oh, I know, I've seen that guy before. Oh yeah. Oh, what was his name?" That happens like all the time.
Yep.
But what happens when you go through your 3-step process, which is wonderful, that all of a sudden something inside the brain just goes, "Oh, well, that's Roger."
Yeah. Why does that work? You mean like that?
Yes. What is the science that connects those?
Our minds work with imagery, right? Our minds work with pictures. And all memory systems is based on applying or associating what you wish to remember to an image, something you already know. That's why if I said to you, "Can you draw the outline of, I don't know, Suriname or Burkina Faso," you may have a hard time. But if I said, "Can you draw the outline of Italy?" you have no problem at all, because you've associated it to something you already know. And that's what memory systems are based on. You already know that a tennis racket would be associated to Roger Federer. And you've already made that connection. It's still in your short-term cache an hour, 2 or 3 or 4 hours ago. And by seeing this guy and seeing him with the tennis racket, which your brain will automatically do, it will automatically make that connection, because we are visual. We like to work with images. It immediately converts to, "Well, that's Roger." Right? Your brain does it. It's just incredible.
How sticky is it? That's my question. So I told you my disease. I told you the disease is CRS, and so I can dial that in from the time I meet the guy in the elevator to the time where I'm signing books and I see him again. I could probably bridge that gap quite easily, given your system, which is great. But how sticky is it? How does the brain allow us to recall it a month later, 3 months later, 6 months later?
Such a good question. That is such a good question, Rob. There are studies on transferring information from short-term to long-term memory. You have to review at very specific times. And the first review is between 60 and 75 minutes. Then you need to review a day later. That's why I moved the cards from, say, the 25th to the 26th. So when I came back into the office in the fitness industry, I would pick up those cards, I'd review them, and I'd put them 3 days later, and then a week, and then a month. And that information stays in that short-term memory. And after 3 months, it's like a phone number. It needs the occasional brush up. But the thing is, what I did is I have an app now that actually employs exactly what I did in the fitness industry. So if you go to an independent advisor, you have maybe the assistant and the advisor's name, and the assistant's often the gatekeeper. You want to remember them. Or maybe, let's say you go to Merrill Lynch branch and you've met 3, 4, 5, or 6 people, and it's wonderful. Then maybe they've given you their cards, and you go back into your car and you've got another appointment. And to your question is, well, how do I remember them a month later? Well, what the app does is what I did with that index card system. Mm. You type somebody's name into the app, it searches social media for their photo, and it downloads their photo, just like we stick in their photo on that card. It downloads them into either social or business folders. Social would be, you'd have subfolders like church members, or the names of your kids' parents' soccer team or whatever. But under business, you'd have subfolders. So say like that Merrill Lynch branch, and then the photos all go into that folder, and then you'd write notes, whatever you've picked up about them, and then the app is set up to remind you at those very specific times in order to put it into long-term memory. Because it's a given that when you go to see a client that you have that information on hand. But if you happen to bump into them, say, at a conference 6 months later, that's when you need that information. Or if you go back to that Merrill Lynch branch 6 months later, you open that folder, that Merrill Lynch folder, and there's all those photos to remind you. Plus, the app would have reminded you anyway. But if you're not sure, open that folder, and there's all those photos. And then you can walk into that branch or that advisor's office with the confidence that you're not going to say, oh, geez, what was that person's name again? So just don't ever underestimate that power of remembering somebody's name. Oh, yeah. It really is the sweetest sound to somebody.
So the app?
The app is Memoryedge, and it's only Apple right now. Yeah. I'm getting an Android version. And honestly, Rob, I didn't develop this as a revenue generator. I'll be long gone from this planet before it breaks even. I literally developed it as an extension to my keynote, because I show people in my keynotes how to remember names, but I want them to be able to put it into long-term memory. So the app was developed for that. So as I say, it's called Memoryedge, and it's on the Apple Store right now.
Awesome. Wholesalers, we'll link that up in the show notes. Let's learn a little bit about your quite ridiculous entry into the Guinness World Record book. What do you do, Bob Gray?
Okay. Oh, this is so relevant. I'm actually in the Guinness Book of Records as the only human on the planet that can speak phonetically backwards. And as the book states, I'm the only human that can write extemporaneously backwards, upside down and backwards, laterally inverted, mirror-styled, with both hands and feet simultaneously while blindfolded. Which begs the question, why?
Well, yeah. So the entry is all of those balled up in one, or it's talents of each one of those individually?
It's like I'm Mr. Backwards. It's
Mr.
I mean, and it's what's funny is if you actually look it up, it won't be in the Guinness Book right now. Although I do have right behind me as I'm speaking to you now, I have the Guinness like the entry well, I guess it's their plaque that they send you. But what happens? They vet. You don't get rid of the record, but they vet the book every year, and they sort of cull it, right? They do a cull. Although I'm still the record holder for speaking and writing backwards and upside down. In fact, I had to do that to become a Canadian, because to become a Canadian, I had to prove I wasn't taking a job from a Canadian. So I literally had I had an interview in the Canada House in London. and literally had to prove that I could speak backwards and write backwards. And I'm not kidding. Just quickly, Rob, the guy actually said to me when I had my interview, he said, I understand you can speak backwards and write backwards, and you have a photographic memory. And I said, well, actually, no, I have a trained memory. And then he said to me, this is the God's honest truth. He said to me, so what's anti-disestablishmentarianism backwards? So I stood there and I took a deep breath and I said, anti-disestablishmentarianism would be I swear to you, Rob, he looked down at his piece of paper, looked up at me, and he went, that's right. Like, how would he know? But he had me write backwards. I gave him a memory demonstration, and he stamped my passport, and then I became a Canadian. Best interview I've ever had. But if you were ever able to play that, so showed Ilepsik Histu Hazarupus backwards, it would come out. It would sound kind of like Polish, but it would come out understandably forwards. It's nuts.
I'm going to have to get our engineer after we're done to play that in the other direction and see if that fleshes out. Bob Gray, I am indebted to you for the one technique. I am interested in our wholesalers learning that technique, and I'm sure there's other things about the wisdom of memory that you can impart. We'll send people over to your website as well to check that out. We'll send people over to Memoryedge, and we thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. All the very best to you.
I appreciate that. Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.